What's going on, everyone? Jake here. Today I want to talk to you about a specific application of mixing that I personally have been running into a lot. This is producing solo acoustic instrument tracks. In this case, we'll be taking a listen to a solo piano track and how I went about mixing it. Mixing a solo instrument, in my opinion, is a very different process than mixing a full band or multiple instruments. And in this video, I'm going to show you why. So let's get into it. Before I show you exactly what I did in this mix session, I want to show you the concepts that I was thinking about when I started working on this piano piece. Now, something that is really important to think about when producing a solo instrument is the recording process. And I'm not going to get into that in this video, but as you can see, I have 3 different tracks that I'm working with. A microphone to capture the high and low parts of the piano, as well as a room mic, which is the purple track here. When recording a solo instrument, or any instrument, it becomes critical to think about capturing as much of the sonic information as possible while not losing clarity. And that is the primary balance that you should think about before recording anything, but especially a solo acoustic performance. Once you are happy with the recorded performance and your piano sounds full and balanced, then you can think about how to make it sound even better in the mixing process. The thing to think about when mixing a solo acoustic instrument are small, subtle adjustments. You do not want to alter or even add too much to the natural sound of the instrument you work so hard to capture. The idea here is to accentuate the better qualities and reduce any issues that still may be present, and that's it. The goal in this application, 99% of the time, is to have a clear and realistic sounding product. So you'll notice when I explain what I did that all my adjustments were very small relative to a normal full mix. So without spending any more of your time, let's cover what I did in this piano track. Alright, so the first thing that I ended up doing here for this piano recording was I went in and I checked my phase alignment. So when I went in to record this, I obviously had 3 mics, so naturally there's going to be some issues with phase. I'll add a link. I just made a video on phase. If you don't know what that is, I'll add a link in the top right hand corner. But anyways, so I went in and I wanted to make sure that the phase was, generally aligned in this piano track. It's something that's really important and can cause some issues if it's very much out of phase. Now, something else to think about here, because we have our piano low and piano high tracks, they are playing different things, so the sound waves are going to look different. But I went in and I pretty much just nudged this piano low track over a little bit just to make sure that it was more aligned, and you can see the negative and positive parts of the wave are more or less matched up. And I went through kind of the whole thing, making sure that everything was at least somewhat aligned. Obviously it's a little bit different, but like what I said, the low piano is picking up a different signal than the high, and I just wanted to make sure that everything was somewhat aligned. You can see these big parts, or these larger areas of the waveform, seem generally aligned. So, and then once again, it all comes down to what you hear, and I thought it sounded good. So, and this one here, like I said, is the room track. And this is going to obviously be naturally a little bit farther back because it's picking up the signal later in the time frame. So that's something that we definitely wanted, and that's how the room mic should be. So I didn't go ahead and mess with the phase and the alignment on this track. But that's something that I thought was pretty important in mixing these solo acoustic instruments, because once again, you want it to be as clear as possible. You don't want any of that comb filtering in there. That'll just hurt the clarity, and that will come out more just because it's only one instrument. The next thing that I went ahead and did was started to blend volumes and pan. So as you can see, they're all not the same volumes. The piano, the lower end of the piano had a bit more intensity, a bit more amplitude, and I wanted to make sure that we had on this master track a pretty even balance between low and high. So I went ahead and started moving the volume faders up and down, and also starting to pan. As you can see, I have it panned a little bit off to the left and right, trying to create a natural stereo image of the piano. I didn't want to go too far left or right due to I don't want it to be taking up the whole stereo field, because that would just be, it would be as if you were standing way up close to the piano. That's not very realistic. I wanted to be back a little bit and have the piano coming from a more specific place. And as you can see, as we get moving forward on with this video, I'll talk about my theory on panning, piano compression, and reverb as well. So that was like the next step. I just started blending them, seeing how much low I wanted, how much high end of the piano I wanted, and as well as how much room mic I wanted. And the room mic is pan center, just because that's where it was when I recorded it. So that was the next step. So the next thing that I went on is, this is actually starting to add processing here. I went ahead and started soloing out each specific piano, and like I said in the introduction of this video, everything that I did was somewhat mild, and I didn't want to make too many adjustments. So I pulled up this Sun EQ here, which I actually have a review on as well. It's a pretty nifty little plugin, and it's great for this application because it's not too abrasive, and it kind of gives you just this one frequency band here, which is what I mostly used. So let's take a listen to the piano high. I took some of this 864 out because I just thought it was adding a little bit of muddiness, kind of hurting some of those frequencies around it, and it just clears it up. It's kind of drony with it. And then added a little bit of high end for shimmer. So that's all I did for EQ on that one. Moving on to the piano low here. So this one I took away some 392 and even boosted a little bit of 100 and gave it a little bit of 6K. So let's listen to this one without. Actually, I'm going to give you a better portion here. So you can hear that low end come up. And just a clearer low end. So that's what that one was doing. And finally, just moving on here to our room mic. Once again, taking out around 350, that frequency was just not working. Adding a little bit of low and adding a little bit of high for a little bit of extra frequency content. Just subtle changes with the EQ. Like I said one more time, it's all about making it still sound natural. You just want to make that natural instrument sound at its best. You're accentuating these parts of the piano that sound good and fixing the parts that are harmful, but still you don't want to be taking out too much. You want to be very specific, very picky with what you take out. You want to make sure that what you're taking out is actually harming the mix. So always check, always trust your ears. Don't trust what you see on the plugin parameters. All right, so moving on, I'm going to talk about compression. As you can see, I did not add compression to each separate channel. My main goal here was to add just a little bit to bring up certain parts of the piano, such as the sustain, such as the middle part, things that I felt were lacking in dynamic range, some stuff that wasn't as consistent as I would like it to be. So I'll show you, I sent just the piano high and the piano low here to our piano compression track, and I have two compressors on here. The first one, as you can see, has a rather fast attack, slower release, so it's kind of affecting the middle part, and once again it's very mild, 2.0 ratio. It's not very much. And then moving forward here, you can see this one, I have a bit of a slower attack and a slower release, so it's affecting the later part of the piano, the sustain of the piano. And once again, 2.5, just a little bit more. And so let's take a listen to what this does. So without it. really listen to the sustain of the piano. It really brings up that sustain, and that was something that I wanted. I wanted to have that character that the sustain brings to the piano. Now, moving on. Actually, before I do that, I just want to kind of give you my ideology here on this compression track here. I wanted it to be wider than the individual channel panning, because I wanted to start to fill out the room. And as you can see, I have the reverb panned at 100, because when you're in a room, you're still hearing the reverb all around you. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of natural panning, whereas the compression's kind of encompassing all of the piano and a little bit more, so that the sustain kind of fills out a little bit more and adds on to the narrowness of my first pans on the piano. Think of it as like a step, the next step, kind of slowly making the spatial room larger and larger with each added effect. All right, so that's my ideology on that. It'd be interesting to hear what you guys think on that, and see what you guys do when it comes to panning your auxiliary tracks. Anyways, moving forward, I want to talk about the reverb here. So I do a couple interesting things with my reverb. Once again, it's pretty mild, 609 milliseconds, and it's just a normal room reverb. The woman that I was recording wanted it to be as if she was playing in her, a living room for her children or something like that. So I was trying to figure out something that was mild, nothing like a church or anything. So that's why I chose this one. I even lowered the width on this control to kind of make it a little bit more narrow. And that was how, backed off the mix here. So let's listen to just this here without the reverb. So it just makes it a little bit softer, gives it a little bit more character, and lets it sit in the room, which is what I was aiming for. And I really think this was a good addition to our mix. Now, the other stuff that we have on here is an EQ and a little bit of compression. So pretty much what I do whenever I add a reverb track, I like to add an EQ before it, so that a specific part of the signal is going to the reverb. Sometimes when you add a reverb, it can accentuate certain frequencies that you don't want in your mix. So that's why I add this, so that I can kind of choose which frequencies of the reverb I want to be portrayed in the mix. So that's why I add an EQ for my reverb unit, which is this VSC here. Now, the last thing that I added to this channel was a little bit of compression. And as you can see, I have the attack is very slow and the release is very slow as well. And what this does is essentially it brings up the sustain of the reverb. So kind of what I did with this parallel compression, this piano parallel compression track, is I wanted to bring up the sustain, except this is just for the reverb. And finally, just with this revival, adds a little bit of high end and low end saturation just for a little bit more sparkle. And that's what I did for my reverb. So let's take a listen to all of that. And so the last thing that I did here in this whole mixing process for a solo acoustic instrument, you might have been seeing that these faders here are moving. Now, this is something that I find, is important in any mix, but especially with adding, I guess, intrigue to your solo acoustic instrument, is adding volume automation. This is a very effective way to give it more character and really bring out specific parts of the piano. Now, what I did here was essentially go through and listen to the parts that I felt like she could be a bit more dynamically interesting, and went in and accentuated those parts myself. So you take a look here where I've done these like little these spiky things. So she has those 3 hits, dun 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 dun, and right there, I decided to bring up the volume to kind of bring those out more, and essentially went through the song, made this part quieter, then louder. So this is just just another thing that you can think about doing to add more to just one instrument, make it sound more interesting, bring the listener on a journey through the song. So these were my tips for mixing a solo acoustic instrument. Hopefully you guys pulled stuff from it, from phase alignment, blending volumes and panning, solo, EQs, compression, all of which is very minimal work for that kind of thing. You don't want to add too much to the nature of the instrument itself. Then adding reverb and working on automation. Very similar process to a normal mix. It's just the application of these processors and of these techniques changes when you're only working with one instrument. So hopefully, like I said, hopefully you guys pick something up out of this. I had a real fun time mixing this and kind of showing it to you. So until next time, everyone, have a good day.